Hi, and welcome back for another episode of Growing Papaya Trees from the Seeds. I've designated this as the finale episode, which may come as a shock and disappointment to those of you who are interested in still following this series. As you can see, there's still some primordia coming out of the trunk, and the plant looks okay at this point. It doesn't look as healthy as it was in earlier in 2022. So 2022 was the first year in which this plant got full sun, and so 2023 going onwards, it didn't last too long into 2023, and I'll show you the footage and go over the reasons and hypotheses as to why. So this episode is basically wrapping up the series. It's me doing a post-mortem and showing you what went wrong, where the damage is. But my general observation was that the tree started looking more yellowish, and granted, this footage that you're seeing right now is of late afternoon sun in the end of 2022, so it's no surprise that it would produce this kind of sort of coloring effect, but as opposed to noonday sun. But even in noonday sun, I could clearly see that it was losing a lot of leaves, as you can see on the main stem, and there are some leaves where the edges are starting to die off, and that can happen for a lot of reasons. It could be overwatering, it could be lack of nutrition, things like that, disease. There's many factors. You can see there are still some leaves that are compound leaves that are nice and green, but you can see that I've lost a lot of leaves, and growth has come to a crashing halt. So there are many reasons why this could be, and one of them is that winter is approaching. So this was the end of 2022, and it's no surprise that a lot of these tropical fruit trees behave like this because they're not supposed to be growing in a climate that's this cold and especially this dry too. So yeah, this is only like 2 weeks later, so you don't see a lot of progression there, but you don't see really any new growth either. So I know the sunlight hours are limited during this time of year, but at the same time, if the plant is doing okay, it should still be growing. And by the time it's, say, December or whatever, it should be cold enough to where if the plant was going to have some kind of overwintering response, go into like stasis or dormancy, and basically just shed all of its leaves and just wait for the spring, then I think I would have seen that in a more obvious fashion. So that's what I first thought it was, the plant's going dormant. But yeah, I eventually realized to my horror that wasn't the case. So it started raining a lot in California, approaching, I think, November and December of 2022. So that's when there was a lot of rains, and I got this transplanted into a greater mass of coco coir at some point in 2022. So you can see it's in this pot that's pretty tall, and I'm actually not a fan of the pot anymore because it blows over too easily. But you can see the trunk here is very thick, sort of becoming woody, so it seemed very promising. But you can see a lot of these leaf petioles, they're just kind of drooping, so it doesn't look that great. The new stuff is coming in, trying to come in, but it's all like a very light green and growing at a glacial pace. So this is a few days later. This snail has a cracked shell, as you can see. It rained a lot during this rainy season in what's considered to be a Mediterranean climate, which means it's just wet, stormy, rainy winters and very hot, dry summers. So yeah, these are more snails. There's probably a few different species here. You can see the shells are different, colors of the flesh are different. These were eating fallen papaya leaves. So it's hard to tell what caused, contributed to the death, or why snails show up. I do kind of tend to lean towards the theory that when snails smell that your plants are rotting in any way, whether it's mostly the shoot system. I don't think they go down into the soil, but they can smell that from a mile away, and then they just come over and try to figure out any way to get onto your plants. And they're pretty good climbers, actually. And they can climb on surprisingly thin branches and offshoots and get to the very fine new growth. And that's what they like to eat, just like we like to eat baby greens, microgreens, etc., bean sprouts, things like that, rather than really tough old leaves. So I think gastropods, they don't have that much in the way of brains like we do, but I think they have the same taste. So this is a slug. I've never seen a slug before in my front yard, and this was a very unpleasant first, but it was really rainy during this rainy season, and I scattered a ton of iron phosphate pellets everywhere. And I've witnessed and shown you footage in other videos and updates of Plant Series where the moment you throw it next to a snail, they just gobble it up like right away. They do the equivalent of snail sprinting to get over and eat those things as quickly as possible. And then through some unknown mechanism or poorly known mechanism, they just die, whereas animals can eat that as a vitamin supplement essentially and have nothing happen to them. So this was later on, not even 2 weeks later. You could see the quality of the foliage has deteriorated considerably. And I'm sure snails have been feeding on these, and with constant rains and cold weather, snails are in abundance. So I think snails and slugs are one of the major pests that damage your garden or your plants in general. And they come out at night, so people might not notice them until it's a lot of damage has been done. But I kind of think about, is it due to your plants are rotting due to overwatering or bad health, and that's why they show up and start eating rotting vegetation? Or are they also just preying on fresh stuff? And it goes both ways. I've seen, I started a new series. I haven't posted an update about that yet, even though I've collected enough footage. But basically, they come to eat the sprouts, and I was thinking, well, these little sprouts are just a few days old. It's a species that sprouts within 6 days from seeds. So how can it already be rotting? But it's also possible that there is root rot going on for some of those. But anyway, these things leave slime trails everywhere, and I'll notice it on my coco coir the next day when it all dries out and the sun comes out briefly. But there were a lot of cloudy days, a lot of cold, rainy days. The weather persisted, so we just saw this huge bloom of flowers in the spring, but it was kind of a late super bloom. But it was also like a snail and slug bloom for me personally. And it's just disgusting seeing these things everywhere. And their numbers are not like really high. At any given moment, I won't even be able to count like 10 on my front yard, scattered among the various locations and pots and plants. But their numbers just seem to be limitless, in that I spray these iron phosphate pellets. And I pulled up one of the plants near my front gate that the former owner left, or renter. And I didn't really, you can see an ant in the lower left corner here. I found quite a few big snails hiding in there because it provided a lot of moisture and cover. But yeah, I mean, I got rid of them all. I got rid of that plant, and it doesn't seem to have lessened the number of snails. So I think the work that I did to get rid of the existing flowering plant by the gate, that was a few months after this footage was filmed. So yeah, I'm just like talking on all the possibilities of where these snails are coming from, how they're where do they keep spawning from? And they're really, really attracted to my yard. So I think it's just natural that when you live in a very dry climate, it's semi-arid, and you have that human artificial watering in the front yard or in your garden or whatever, then all creatures that love and need a large amount of water to survive, such as this, will just swarm over. But that begs the question: how did San Diego and other areas of Southern California get so many snails and slugs to begin with? If it's in natural conditions, it wouldn't be able to support this large population. So I don't really know. It's interesting to think about. But here you can see they're very, very bold in daytime. They're just climbing all the way up and eating everything. Normally they eat at night and destroy some of your new sprouts and eat some of your leaves, and then they flee. And you might see them curled up in their shells during the day, but they try to hide at least and get away when daybreak happens. But that's not the case here. And I think the smell and taste of rotting vegetation is just irresistible for them. So, knowing what I know, by the end of this episode, which was basically filmed mid-March 2023, I realized that maybe they're just showing up because the entire plant is rotting from the inside out, and I'll show you why I believe that to be the case later on in this video. But you can see when I just scattered those things, the little iron phosphate pellets, how bad it was. The lower stems all just look like very sickly. So the real trouble was when I saw that it was almost like beneath the soil line. This is not real soil, it's coco coir. Something had eaten away at the trunk. So I put on some gloves and then I started digging, and when I pressed against the main trunk, I felt it was all soft, and my heart sank, and I knew it was basically over. I mean, you can see some lateral roots going out, but everything just has a very sickly color, and when you feel beneath the soil line on the trunk and it just feels mushy, then it's basically over. So yeah, this is the last day. I'm just doing a post-mortem on this plant. Gonna give it a good yank and rip it out, but it didn't seem like the coco coir. As you can see, it doesn't look very wet, but I think just because I watered whenever it wasn't raining, and it rained a lot, so past a certain point this plant just lost so many leaves that it wasn't blowing over in the wind anymore. And I don't think at this position, kind of near the fence, still relatively close to the building, it just wasn't blowing over anymore. So I got it some more sun, but also coming with that sun exposure was exposure to the elements and all the rain that came during the winter. We never had freezing temperatures this winter. It was just lots of cold days and rain. So you can see it's rotten inside, and I bet this taproot at one point probably just went all the way to the bottom of the pot. But when I yank this, you can see the extent of the rot. Like, that's all mushy and totally disgusting. I'm surprised the snails didn't try to get at that. They could if they wanted to. But they're more about eating the leaves. And yeah, it had the consistency of like mashed potatoes, basically. It was just, it didn't smell, which is surprising, but clearly that's not like any kind of like healthy living tissue anymore, I would say. It takes like plant tissue a long time to like completely look dead anyway. So you can see there's all these like root fragments on the ground. So the whole entire root system just disintegrated. And yeah, this is kind of reminding me of ginseng actually in appearance, but yeah, it's a sad end to a very long series. I'm sure now that I have full sun and I'm using coco coir, I could get much quicker results. I could have another plant like this, probably within a year very easily, but Maybe I should try growing some other plants. And I've really slowed down my pace because I've been busy with work and doing other things. But thanks for watching this very long series, and please stay tuned to my YouTube channel for new ones.